Welcome to the modern elite. She didn't change suddenly. You just didn't understand what was happening. There was a time when her attention felt effortless. She texted first. She asked about your day. She leaned in emotionally and energetically without hesitation. It felt natural, almost predictable. And then something shifted. She stopped chasing. Her messages became shorter. The urgency faded. The curiosity softened. She didn't disappear, but she pulled back just enough for you to feel it. And that's when confusion begins. Because from your perspective, it looks like disinterest. It feels like distance. It triggers a quiet question in your mind. Did I do something wrong? This is where most men misunderstand. You're focusing on what she does instead of why she does it, because what you're seeing isn't always a loss of attraction. Sometimes it's the exact opposite. Sometimes when a woman stops chasing, it's not because she feels less, it's because she feels more. But that more doesn't express itself the way you expect. At the beginning, her effort is driven by curiosity. She's exploring you, trying to understand your emotional landscape, testing the connection. There's a natural openness there, a willingness to invest without fear because nothing feels at risk yet. But as that connection deepens, something subtle happens beneath the surface. She becomes aware of her own feelings, aware of the potential impact you have on her, aware that this is no longer casual or light, but something that could affect her emotionally. And when that awareness sets in, her behavior begins to shift, not because she's losing interest, but because she's protecting it. You see, emotional investment doesn't always make someone move closer. Sometimes it makes them step back because now it matters. And when something matters, people become more careful, more measured, more intentional. So instead of chasing, she observes. Instead of reaching out impulsively, she waits. Instead of showing everything, she reveals less, not to manipulate, but to understand where you stand. This is where the confusion becomes dangerous, because her silence feels like distance. But in reality, it's often attention just expressed differently. She's watching how you respond without her effort. She's noticing if you step forward or if everything collapses without her pushing it. And this is where the dynamic changes, because when she stops chasing, she's no longer leading the connection. She's giving you space to show your role in it. But if you misread this moment, if you assume her silence means she's gone, you react from insecurity instead of understanding. You chase harder, you over-explain, you try to fix something that isn't broken. And in doing that, you shift the balance, because now the connection becomes uneven. Not because she changed, but because you didn't understand why she did. And that's the moment where things start to slip. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly in the space between what you think is happening and what's actually happening beneath the surface. What's actually happening beneath the surface is far more psychological than it appears. When a woman begins to feel something real, her behavior becomes less about expression and more about evaluation. This is where most men misunderstand. You assume that emotional interest should always look like increased effort, more text, more attention, more visible signs of desire. But deeper emotional investment doesn't always expand outward. Sometimes it contracts inward, because now she's not just feeling, she's processing. She's asking herself questions she didn't ask before. Is this stable? Is he consistent? Is what I'm feeling safe to trust? And these questions don't come from doubt about you alone. They come from awareness of herself. Because when emotions deepen, vulnerability increases, and vulnerability creates caution. So instead of continuing to chase, she begins to slow down. Not to play games, but to observe reality without emotional distortion. You're focusing on what she does instead of why she does it. Her reduced effort isn't a withdrawal of interest, it's a shift from impulse to intention. At first, she moved toward you because she felt like it. Now she pauses because she wants to understand if she should. This is a critical psychological transition, because attraction is no longer the only factor. Now alignment matters. Now consistency matters. Now how you respond in her absence matters more than how you reacted when she was fully present. And this is where many men unknowingly fail the test they didn't even realize existed, because they interpret her stillness as rejection, and rejection triggers anxiety. That anxiety creates behavior that feels unnatural, forced, slightly out of sync with who they were before. They text more than usual, they seek reassurance, they try to pull her back into the dynamic she just stepped out of. But what they don't realize is this: she's not looking for you to chase her. She's looking to see if you remain grounded without her chasing you, because stability is revealed in absence, not presence. Anyone can feel confident when attention is consistent. But when that attention softens, when the energy becomes quieter, that's when your true emotional state becomes visible, and she sees it. She notices if you become reactive. She notices if your behavior changes. She notices if your sense of self depends on her engagement. And these observations shape how she feels moving forward, not consciously, but deeply. Because attraction at this stage isn't just emotional, it's psychological. It's about how you handle uncertainty. It's about whether your presence feels steady or dependent. And when she stops chasing, she's creating that space of uncertainty, not to confuse you, but to understand you. The problem is most men don't recognize this space for what it is. They see distance. She sees clarity. There are patterns in her behavior that become visible only when you stop reacting and start observing. Because when she stops chasing, she doesn't disappear, she shifts. Her presence becomes quieter but more intentional. She may not initiate as often, but when she does, there's meaning behind it. Her words carry more weight, even if there are fewer of them. This is where most men misunderstand. You're measuring interest by frequency, not depth. But what's actually happening beneath the surface is a recalibration. She's adjusting her energy to see how the connection holds without her constant input. And in that adjustment, certain patterns begin to reveal themselves. She watches how long it takes you to reach out, not because she's keeping score, but because timing reflects priority. She notices the tone of your responses, not just what you say, but how you say it. Is there calmness? Is there pressure? Is there subtle neediness disguised as effort? She becomes more sensitive to emotional shifts because now she's not chasing the connection, she's studying it. And this is where the dynamic becomes delicate, because small changes in your behavior create large shifts in her perception. If you remain composed, she feels safe. If you become inconsistent, she feels uncertain. If you try too hard, she feels imbalanced. You're focusing on what she does instead of why she does it. Her reduced effort isn't a test designed to make you fail. It's a natural response to increasing emotional stakes. And within that response, she's looking for alignment. Not perfection, not performance, just alignment. Does your energy match hers even when hers becomes quieter? Do you remain the same person, or do you shift based on her behavior? Because consistency builds trust, and trust at this stage is more important than attraction. Attraction brought her closer. Trust determines whether she stays, and trust is built in moments where nothing obvious is happening. In the silence, in the pauses, in the space where there's no immediate validation, no constant reassurance. That's where real connection either strengthens or quietly fades. And here's the part most people miss. When she stops chasing, she's not stepping away from you. She's stepping into observation. She's allowing the connection to exist without forcing it to see if it naturally sustains itself. And your role in that moment isn't to chase harder or withdraw completely. It's to remain present without pressure, to show interest without losing composure, to engage without seeking control, because the moment you try to control the dynamic, you disrupt it. And she feels that immediately, not logically, but emotionally, because emotional awareness isn't about what's said, it's about what's felt. And when she senses imbalance, she adjusts further, not dramatically, but subtly, until the connection either stabilizes or dissolves. And that outcome depends less on her actions and more on how you respond to them. What most men misunderstand in this situation isn't her behavior, it's the meaning they assign to it. When she stops chasing, they interpret it as loss of interest, loss of attraction, loss of connection. And that interpretation shapes their response. Because once you believe you're losing something, your instinct is to hold on to it tighter. But this is where the shift needs to happen, because what feels like loss is often a transition, a movement from emotional excitement into emotional evaluation. You're focusing on what she does instead of why she does it. Her pulling back isn't an indication that you need to do more. It's an invitation for you to do less but better. Less reacting, less overthinking, less trying to control the outcome, and more being, more stability, more self-containment, more emotional independence. Because the truth is, attraction isn't sustained by effort alone, it's sustained by emotional experience. And the experience she's looking for now isn't intensity, it's consistency, it's calm. It's the feeling that she can step back and the connection doesn't collapse, that it doesn't become chaotic, that it doesn't suddenly depend entirely on her to survive. And this is where many men lose their position without realizing it, because they start performing. They try to say the right things. They try to act more confident. They try to win her back even though she hasn't left. And in doing that, they move away from authenticity. They become slightly different than the person she initially connected with. And that difference creates subtle dissonance. Not enough to create conflict, but enough to create distance, because authenticity is stable. Performance is not. And she feels that difference even if she can't explain it. So the mindset shift is simple but not easy. Stop trying to bring her back to where she was and start meeting her where she is now, in a quieter space, in a more intentional dynamic where connection isn't driven by constant interaction but by underlying stability. This doesn't mean you withdraw. It doesn't mean you become distant or indifferent. It means you become grounded. You respond instead of react. You engage without chasing. You show interest without needing immediate validation. Because when she senses that stability, something changes. Her guard lowers. Her curiosity returns. But this time it's different. It's not driven by initial attraction. It's driven by emotional safety. And emotional safety creates something deeper than attraction ever could. It creates trust. And once trust begins to form, the dynamic shifts again, not back to how it was before, but into something stronger and far more real. Clarity doesn't come from controlling the situation. It comes from understanding it. And when you truly understand why she stops chasing, everything begins to feel different because now you're not reacting to her behavior. You're interpreting it correctly. You're no longer pulled into emotional confusion. You're no longer trying to fix something that isn't broken. You're simply present, aware, and in control of your own state. This is where the dynamic stabilizes because emotional control isn't about suppressing how you feel. It's about not letting those feelings dictate your behavior. And when she senses that in you, she relaxes because now the connection feels balanced, not forced, not fragile, but grounded. You're focusing on what she does instead of why she does it. But once you shift that focus, everything becomes clearer. Her silence isn't distance. Her space isn't rejection. Her reduced effort isn't disinterest. It's a different form of engagement, one that requires a different response. And that response is not intensity. It's calm confidence. It's the ability to remain steady even when things become uncertain, because uncertainty is where most connections are tested. Not in the beginning when everything feels easy, but in the middle where things become quieter, more subtle, more real. And if you can navigate that space without losing yourself, you don't just maintain attraction, you deepen it, because very few people know how to exist in that space without reacting emotionally. Very few people can stay grounded when attention fluctuates, and that's what sets you apart. Not what you say, not what you do, but how you are. Consistent, composed, unaffected by temporary shifts, because you understand that real connection isn't linear. It moves, it adjusts, it breathes. And when you allow it to do that without trying to control every change, it becomes something much stronger than attraction. It becomes alignment. And alignment doesn't need chasing. It sustains itself. So the next time she stops chasing, don't panic, don't overreact, and don't assume the worst. Pause, observe, and stay grounded in who you are. Because sometimes the moment she steps back is the moment she's actually looking to see if you're worth stepping closer to. And if this made you see things differently, subscribe, because understanding her mind changes.